Hi everyone, welcome to a video that I'm going to be starting a series about. This is one layer wonder cards. These will all be exactly one layer cards, no extra dimension, no extra layers, very clean and simple cards. I'm going to be using the Sketchy Cupcake stamp set from Neat and Tangled. I thought this was the perfect stamp set to start with. I've actually got two one-layer cards with this. You'll see another video later on down the road using this stamp set. But I thought this was the perfect one to use because if there's one thing we all have in our stash, we probably all have some cupcakes. So I thought this would be very easy to replicate. I'm going to be stamping on an A2 top folding white card base. I have a video all about making card bases. I will leave that link in the top right hand corner if you have any questions. And for my stamping, I'll be using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I'll be using some colored pencils and OMS to blend that out so that plays well with my coloring medium. If you wanted to, you could use any coloring medium you wanted to. Just remember, if you use your alcohol markers, it's going to bleed through on a one-layer card. That's why I'm using colored pencils, plus I like them more, to be honest. I made masks of all the stamps I'm going to be using from stamp masking paper. This is from Inkadinkado. It's what I use all the time to make my masks. The great thing about this is it's reusable. I just like to pop them on the back of the stamp set itself, and then I can use them as many times as they'll stick down. For this card, I'm going to go ahead and start off by masking two widths of painter's tape on the bottom and top. I actually only ended up using one width of painter's tape on the top. I'll take that off in a moment, but for now I put down two. Then I'm going to go ahead and lay out my scene using my mask. This is a great little way to space out your scene and make sure you have it all centered before you go in and start your stamping. And I just like to lay the masks out kind of where I think they're going to be. That way I can stamp down and I know exactly where everything needs to go to be centered. I'm starting off on the left hand side with the bottom of the cupcake. I just went ahead and inked that up and stamped it down. I just moved the masks out of the way when I'm ready. Then I can stamp the one on the right hand side. Now I know that they're even and I can go ahead and stamp the tops of them, and I know they're not going to bump into each other. So on the left side, I'm going to be using the kind of muffin top with just the rounded top. And then on the right hand side, I'll go ahead and stamp the more frosting looking top, which has all different layers on it, which is so cute. So I went ahead and stamped that down. Then there's this little face in the stamp set. The great thing about this face is whichever way you angle it, it can be used for both of them, and they both look like they're looking at each other, but it's the same exact stamp. You just need to angle it a little bit differently. It's so weird, but so cute too. I don't know, it worked perfectly. Then above that little muffin, I wanted to put this little speech bubble. I didn't have enough room with both layers of painter's tape down, so I just removed that top one, and I'll go ahead and stamp that speech bubble right over the little left hand guy, and that is going to be the place where I put my sentiment. So I'll go ahead and stamp that down quickly, making sure I don't run into that painter's tape or either of the muffins, and then I can go ahead and stamp my sentiment right in that, and that is going to say "Hey Sweets." I'll finish off this sentiment on the inside of the card, but for now the outside is just going to say "Hey Sweets." Now I need some masks to make my little scene, so I have some dies here. I have a grass border die. These are all from Tailored Expressions. I do not believe they still make these. However, these are very popular dies. Tons of companies have grass borders. Tons of companies have picket fences. If I'm being honest, I even have a couple of different picket fences and grass borders. Nothing I'm proud of, but I have them. So I'm sure you could find some in your stash. I like to cut those from just regular plain computer paper. That way they're nice and thin, and then when I'm done I can just toss them. I don't feel bad about tossing them since it's just cheap computer paper. I went ahead and made all those masks like you've seen in the beginning, so I'm going to cover up all of my stamped images. So I've got my two little cupcakes, bottoms and tops I'm going to cover, and then also that little speech bubble. And to mask those, you just peel off the blue backing and you can quickly pop the mask right on over. If you don't have masking paper, you can use computer paper as well. Just put a little bit of rolled up removable tape on the back. You can also use post-it notes. Either just make sure you stamp on the sticky part, or you can use the whole sticky back post-it notes. But moving on, I'm going to go ahead and mask off a little grassy area right underneath those cupcakes. And I just take the top of that grass border and I just use some Distress ink and sponge that on right underneath. I'm using Mowed Lawn Distress ink here, and I just quickly sponge it on. I'm not going from the edge of the paper onto the cardstock or anything. I just go down straight color. If I get a little bit of a hard edge, I just add more color and that evens it out. Now, to mask off the rest of the scene, I went ahead and put the actual grass border over the grass that I had already put down, and I taped that into place. That's going to cover all of my green. Then I went ahead and put the picket fence down. I just taped that down to the side. I've got a computer piece of paper back there to catch all the extra ink, and that is going to make sure all the area behind that stays white while I sponge over the top of it, and I'm going in with some Salty Ocean to sponge in my sky. I'm really pressing through that little picket fence, that way it gets all the little areas in between blue so you can really see that picket fence outline. And you don't need to do any extra masking for that. You don't need to do any extra little coloring for it. Because I'm using a white picket fence, it can stay white and it will look perfect. So I went ahead and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all the areas around those little cupcakes and also the painter's tape on the top had enough color so you could differentiate between the mask layers. And then I'll go ahead and start pulling everything up, which is the fun part. So I had my picket fence down, which everything underneath that stayed perfectly white. So I've got my white picket fence. Then I've got my little green grassy area, which stayed perfectly green that I had masked off. And I can start peeling off all those little other layers. So I had the Hey Sweets right up there at the top. Everything underneath that stayed perfectly white. And I'm also going to pull up all my little cupcakes. And those are white still, but I'll go ahead and color those in just a moment. But look at that. I love the little scene this created. I like to use, you can use tweezers if you want to, or you can use kind of that little pick tool that I have there. The less you touch your mask, the more times, more uses you're going to get out of them. So try and touch them the least amount of as possible. And then I just stick them on the back of my little stamp set, and that way I know exactly where they are, and I know I have them if I need them. Now for my coloring, I'm going to be using my Prismacolor colored pencils, and I am going to very quickly color these in. This is my favorite coloring medium, colored pencils in OMS. I just love it. It's the first one I started out with, and you know, it does maybe take a little bit longer than alcohol markers, but not really a whole lot. And if you have good colored pencils, you can get really vibrant colors from these as well. You can also get some great shadows and highlights with these if you just take the time and use them. I love them. So I'm using some fuchsia colors on the right hand side for that little cupcake. I started off with darker and then went lighter towards the top of each one of those layers. Then on the left hand side, I'm going to go ahead and make that little guy's top turquoise. I know he's supposed to be a muffin, but I wanted to go with turquoise anyway, so I started off with darker towards the bottom and went in a little bit of a circular motion, and then I'll go lighter towards the top and leave just a tidbit of white on the top to really make that nice highlighted area. Now it's time to take off that painter's tape, and there you have a little bit of a masked off scene as well. So you've got some nice areas on the bottom and the top that stayed nice and stark and white. So you've got a little differentiation, and it just adds more interest to the card as well. Also, making the scene a little bit smaller helps to contain everything, and it just looks so much more put together. So on the inside, like I said, I'm going to be finishing off the sentiment. I stamped happy birthday, so it'll say Hey Sweets happy birthday on the inside. Then I'll be using those sprinkles, and I think I went a little bit overboard with these, but that's okay. I'm just stamping a bunch of them around that happy birthday sentiment. Again, I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black here. I'll be filling these in with the same colors of Prisma's colored pencils that I used on the outside. I'm just going to bring those to the sprinkles on the inside. So I went in a little bit of a square here with those, and then quickly I'm coming in with the pinks and the fuchsias, and I brought in a yellow that matched the cupcake that I used on the outside, and quickly coloring these all in for some nice sprinkle filled color. Like I said, I think I went a little overboard, but it works. So that finished off the card for today. I love the way it turned out. I know I have trouble with one layer cards, so I figured this video might help you think of some new ideas and also maybe give you an idea of a card you could make. So there's a few closer looks at all the masked areas and all the colored areas of this card. You don't have to have a ton of dimension and layers to make a card beautiful, and this one is going to go through the mail so easily with no extra postage. So one last photo of this adorable card, and then that is going to do it for me today. As always, on the left side of your screen there are a few different links you can click on. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to click the like button down below, and if you are not subscribed, you can do that on the left hand side as well. Thank you guys for watching today, and happy crafting.